Chapter 22. Walking out on the covenant of God. God's orders. Go to the royal palace and deliver this message. Say, listen to what God says, O King of Judah, you who sit on David's throne, you and your officials and all the people who go in and out of these palace gates. This is God's message. Attend to matters of justice. Set things right between people. Rescue victims from their exploiters. Don't take advantage of the homeless, the orphans, the widows. Stop the murdering. If you obey these commands, then kings who follow in the line of David will continue to go in and out of these palace gates, mounted on horses and riding in chariots, they and their officials and the citizens of Judah. But if you don't obey these commands, then I swear, God's decree, this palace will end up a heap of rubble. This is God's verdict on Judah's royal palace. I number you among my favorite places, like the lovely hills of Gilead, like the soaring peaks of Lebanon. Yet I swear I'll turn you into a wasteland, as empty as a ghost town. I'll hire a demolition crew, well equipped with sledgehammers and wrecking bars, pound the country to a pulp, and burn it all up. Travelers from all over will come through here and say to one another, why would God do such a thing to this wonderful city? They'll be told, because they walked out on the covenant of their God, took up with other gods, and worshipped them. Building a fine house, but destroying lives. Don't weep over dead King Josiah. Don't waste your tears. Weep for his exiled son. He's gone for good. He'll never see home again. For this is God's word on Shallum, son of Josiah, who succeeded his father as king of Judah. He's gone from here, gone for good. He'll die in the place they've taken him to. He'll never see home again. Doom to him who builds palaces but bullies people, who makes a fine house but destroys lives, who cheats his workers and won't pay them for their work, who says, I'll build me an elaborate mansion with spacious rooms and fancy windows. I'll bring in rare and expensive woods and the latest in interior decor. So that makes you a king, living in a fancy palace? Your father got along just fine, didn't he? He did what was right and treated people fairly, and things went well with him. He stuck up for the down and out, and things went well for Judah. Isn't this what it means to know me? God's decree. But you're blind and brainless. All you think about is yourself, taking advantage of the weak, bulldozing your way, bullying victims. This is God's epitaph on Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah. Doom to this man. Nobody will shed tears over him. Poor, poor brother. Nobody will shed tears over him. Poor, poor master. They'll give him a donkey's funeral, drag him out of the city, and dump him. You've made a total mess of your life. People of Jerusalem, climb a Lebanon peak and weep. Climb a Bashan mountain and wail. Climb the Abarim ridge and cry. You've made a total mess of your life. I spoke to you when everything was going your way. You said, I'm not interested. You've been that way as long as I've known you. Never listened to a thing I said. All your leaders will be blown away. All your friends end up in exile. And you'll find yourself in the gutter, disgraced by your evil life. You big city people thought you were so important, thought you were king of the mountain. You're soon going to be doubled up in pain, pain worse than the pangs of childbirth. As sure as I am the living God, God's decree, even if you, Jehoiakim, son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were the signet ring on my right hand, I'd pull you off and give you to those who are out to kill you, to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon and the Chaldeans, and then throw you, both you and your mother, into a foreign country, far from your place of birth. There, you'll both die. You'll be homesick, desperately homesick, but you'll never get home again. Is Jehoiakim a leaky bucket, a rusted-out pail good for nothing? Why else would he be thrown away, he and his children, thrown away to a foreign place? Oh, land, 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 listen to God's message. This is God's verdict. Write this man off as if he were childless, a man who will never amount to anything. Nothing will ever come of his life. He's the end of the line, the last of the kings. chapter 23, an authentic David branch. Doom to the shepherd leaders who butcher and scatter my sheep. God's decree. So here's what I, God, Israel's God, say to the shepherd leaders who misled my people. You've scattered my sheep. You've driven them off. You haven't kept your eye on them. Well, let me tell you, I'm keeping my eye on you, keeping track of your criminal behavior. I'll take over and gather what's left of my sheep, gather them in from all the lands where I've driven them. I'll bring them back where they belong, and they'll recover and flourish. I'll set shepherd leaders over them who will take good care of them. They won't live in fear or panic anymore. All the lost sheep rounded up. God's decree. Time's coming, God's decree, when I'll establish a truly righteous David branch, a ruler who knows how to rule justly. He'll make sure of justice and keep people united. In his time, Judah will be secure again, and Israel will live in safety. This is the name they'll give him, God who puts everything right. So watch for this. The time's coming, God's decree, when no one will say, as sure as God lives, the God who brought the Israelites out of Egypt, but as sure as God lives, the God who brought the descendants of Israel back from the north country and from the other countries where he'd driven them, so that they can live on their own good earth. The everything will turn out fine sermon. My head is reeling, my limbs are limp. I'm staggering like a drunk, seeing double from too much wine, and all because of God, because of his holy words. Now, for what God says regarding the lying prophets. Can you believe it? A country teeming with adulterers, faithless, promiscuous, idolater adulterers. They're a curse on the land. The land's a wasteland. Their unfaithfulness is turning the country into a cesspool. Prophets and priests devoted to desecration. They have nothing to do with me as their God. My very own temple, mind you, mud spattered with their crimes. God's decree. But they won't get by with it. They'll find themselves on a slippery slope, careening into the darkness, somersaulting into the pitch-black dark. I'll make them pay for their crimes. It will be the year of doom. God's decree. Over in Samaria, I saw prophets acting like silly fools. Shocking. They preached using that no God B.I.B.L.E for a text, messing with the minds of my people. And the Jerusalem prophets are even worse. Horrible. Sex-driven, living a lie, subsidizing a culture of wickedness, and never giving it a second thought. They're as bad as those wretches in old Sodom, the degenerates of old Gomorrah. So here's the message to the prophets from God of the angel armies. I'll cook them a supper of maggoty meat with after-dinner drinks of strychnine. The Jerusalem prophets are behind all this. They're the cause of the godlessness polluting this country. A message from God of the angel armies. Don't listen to the sermons of the prophets. It's all hot air. Lies, lies, and more lies. They make it all up. Not a word they speak comes from me. They preach their everything will turn out fine sermon to congregations with no taste for God. Their nothing bad will ever happen to you sermon to people who are set in their own ways. Have any of these prophets bothered to meet with me, the true God? Bothered to take in what I have to say? Listened to and then lived out my word? Look out. God's hurricane will be let loose. My hurricane blast, spinning the heads of the wicked like tops. God's raging anger won't let up until I've made a clean sweep, completing the job I began. When the job's done, you'll see that it's been well done. Quit the God told me this kind of talk. I never sent these prophets, but they ran anyway. I never spoke to them, but they preached anyway. If they'd have bothered to sit down and meet with me, they'd have preached my message to my people. They'd have gotten them back on the right track, gotten them out of their evil ruts. Am I not a God near at hand, God's decree, and not a God far off? Can anyone hide out in a corner where I can't see him? God's decree. Am I not present everywhere, whether seen or unseen? God's decree. I know what they're saying. All these prophets who preach lies using me as their text, saying, I had this dream, I had this dream. How long do I have to put up with this? Do these prophets give 2 cents about me as they preach their lies and spew out their grandiose delusions? They swap dreams with one another, feed on each other's delusive dreams, trying to distract my people from me, just as their ancestors were distracted by the no God, Baal. You prophets who do nothing but dream, go ahead and tell your silly dreams. But you prophets who have a message from me, tell it truly and faithfully. What does straw have in common with wheat? Nothing else is like God's decree. Isn't my message like fire? God's decree. Isn't it like a sledgehammer busting a rock? I've had it with the prophets who get all their sermons secondhand from each other. Yes, I've had it with them. They make up stuff and then pretend it's a real sermon. Oh yes, I've had it with the prophets who preach the lies they dream up, spreading them all over the country, ruining the lives of my people with their cheap and reckless lies. I never sent these prophets, never authorized a single one of them. They do nothing for this people. Nothing. God's decree. And anyone, including prophets and priests, who ask, what's God got to say about all this? What's troubling him? Tell him, you're the trouble, and I'm getting rid of you. God's decree. And if anyone, including prophets and priests, goes around saying glibly, God's message, I'll punish him and his family. Instead of claiming to know what God says, ask questions of one another, such as, how do we understand God in this? But don't go around pretending to know it all, saying, God told me this, God told me that. I don't want to hear it anymore. Only the person I authorize speaks for me. Otherwise, my message gets twisted. The message of the living God of the angel armies. You can ask the prophets, how did God answer you? What did he tell you? But don't pretend that you know all the answers yourselves and talk like you know it all. I'm telling you, quit the God told me this, God told me that kind of talk. Are you paying attention? You'd better, because I'm about to take you in hand and throw you to the ground, you and this entire city that I gave to your ancestors. I've had it with the lot of you. You're never going to live this down. You're going down in history as a disgrace. Chapter 24. 2 baskets of figs. God showed me 2 baskets of figs placed in front of the temple of God. This was after Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken Jehoiakim, son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, from Jerusalem into exile in Babylon, along with the leaders of Judah, the craftsmen, and the skilled laborers. In one basket, the figs were of the finest quality, ripe and ready to eat. In the other basket, the figs were rotten, so rotten they couldn't be eaten. God said to me, Jeremiah, what do you see? Figs, I said, excellent figs of the finest quality, and also rotten figs, so rotten they can't be eaten. Then God told me, this is the message from the God of Israel. The exiles from here that I've sent off to the land of Babylonians are like the good figs, and I'll make sure they get good treatment. I'll keep my eye on them so that their lives are good, and I'll bring them back to this land. I'll build them up, not tear them down. I'll plant them, not uproot them. And I'll give them a heart to know me, God. They'll be my people, and I'll be their God, for they'll have returned to me with all their hearts. But like the rotten figs, so rotten they can't be eaten, is Zedekiah, king of Judah. Rotten figs, that's how I'll treat him and his leaders, along with the survivors here and those down in Egypt. I'll make them something that the whole world will look on as disgusting, repugnant outcasts, their names used as curse words wherever in the world I drive them. And I'll make sure they die like flies, from war, starvation, disease, whatever, until the land I once gave to them and their ancestors is completely rid of them.